Nicely done. And one more feature that I would like to add to our app is restricting the access of the checkout page if we haven't logged in. And you might be wondering, well, what are you talking about? We're already hiding the checkout if the user hasn't logged in. Yep, that is true. But what do you think is going to happen if I log out? And I can clearly see that since I have a login option. But if I go to the URL bar and if I just say checkout, that's interesting. So I can still navigate there, even though technically we restricted the access to the page, correct? Because we were not showing the link. Now, the gotcha here is that we need to set up a private route where, again, we're going to check whether the user has logged in. And then if he or she has logged in, then of course we'll display the page. If not, then we'll redirect back to the homepage. Now, if you want to see where I got the info from, again, navigate to the single apps, the library one, and protect the route. So this is where I got the idea. Now I combined a little bit with, of course, the React router, but idea stays exactly the same. So now I would want to go, of course, back to my application, and I'm going to be looking for the app.js. We'll start over there. And if you remember, in the pages, there's also a page by the name of private route. And just make sure that you export from index.js. That's a must. And then in the app.js, notice where we're getting all these components. Now, instead of just showcasing the checkout using the route, I'll switch this around where I'll say that I would want to pass in my private route. So I have my component, which at the moment doesn't have anything in it. But instead of route component, we are using this private route component. And keep in mind that we're still passing the same props. So that is not changing. In here, though, we have a checkout. And essentially, the main idea is following where in that private route, I'll check for my user. If user exists, then I would just want to return my children, which in this case is the checkout. If it doesn't exist, then I'll show you another way how we can redirect. So in other words, I'll show you another way how we can programmatically navigate to a different page. So let's save app.js. Make sure, of course, that you have a private route and all that. Make sure that you wrap the checkout. And then I'll close all my files now because we only want to work in the private route. And then notice the imports. So I'm still importing the route from React Router DOM. That stays the same. And then I have my redirect component. So that is going to be that another way how we can programmatically navigate to a different page. If you remember, when we looked at it the first time, I showed you the history.push. And essentially, you can use either of these options. And then, of course, I also have this use user context. Now, how do we set up this private route? Well, first of all, we need to understand that in the app.js, when we're setting up this private route, we're still passing these props. And that's extremely important because, of course, I want to use them. Because if the user has logged in, then I still want to direct the user to whatever page he or she wants to go, in this case, checkout. And in order to collect those values, we would want to go here with our params. And I'll say children. Remember, that was that special one. And the reason why I'm using children, because, of course, whatever is inside the private route, that is something that I would want to return. Because also keep in mind that we can use this private route in multiple places if we set it up correctly. And then the second thing is the rest of the parameters. And in vanilla.js, or essentially in JavaScript, we have this operator by the name of REST operator. Now, we use this operator when we're working with function parameters, though. So don't confuse it with spread. So spread essentially just spreads out all our values. If we have an array, then it spreads out into individual items. But REST operator, and when we use it, of course, in the function parameter, does the opposite, where I say dot, 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 and then I can call it whatever I would want. But a common convention is calling this REST. So what this REST is gathering is everything that we pass in over here. So we grab the children. This is going to be the checkout, of course. And then we grab rest of the parameters. Now, if you would want to console log, you can definitely do so. So I'm going to go with console log here. And let's just take a look at the children first. And also let's take a look at the rest one. So that is the name. Again, you can call this Bugs Bunny. It doesn't really matter. Let's see. Hopefully it's going to work. So at the moment I have private route. And if I take a look at the console, notice I have object. So of course this is going to be those children first. And then I have the second one, correct? So these are rest of the parameters. Now, why do I want those rest? Because when I return the children, eventually from this component, I would want to dump them in that children as well. Now, let's go back to our component. And then I would want to grab my user. So let's go with const. And I'm going to call this my user. So the same way I'm destructuring from user context. Okay, we get our hook. And then I would want to set up the route. So now, exactly like we have in app.js for rest of the routes, I'm going to use my route. So regardless of my user value, I'm going to go with route. So I'm still returning this component. Then I'll spread out my rest. So now I'll spread out those props that I gathered in rest. Again, keep in mind, this is a rest operator. This is a spread operator. So here we collect them. And then I spread them out on this route, just like we have, for example, here. Remember route, exact, and path. So now I'm just collecting here and then spreading them on the route. And then when it comes to route, I'm going to remove this text. And once I've spread out all my props, then I would want to set up a special prop by the name of render. And then inside of this prop, the render prop, this is where I'll pass in the function first. I'll say that there's going to be a function, my arrow function, and then I'll say return. And now I would want to set up my condition again. So ternary operator, my user, and if the user exists, then I would want to grab the children, which of course in our case is the checkout, correct? And if not, then we return a redirect. So we go here with children. And if the user is false, and I'm not going to console log, we should be in good shape as far as understanding that. And then we'll just go with the redirect component. And we need to keep in mind that for redirect, we just need to pass the to prop, essentially where we're saying where we would want to go with this component. So we save it. And now we should go back to home, even if we're just trying to access using the URL bar. Now, keep in mind, there's no way for us to access it using a link. We are actually protecting that in our nav bar and sidebar and all that. But we were able to navigate before using the URL bar, but now we restricted the access. So I can type all day long and I'll be directed back to my homepage. Why? Well, because we have restricted the route. Again, one more time, let's try to log in. In this case, I'm going to use my Twitter option. And if everything works correctly, we should see the checkout. And of course, I can navigate to a checkout page.